Okay, good. I want to welcome everyone tonight to our Torah study, and tonight we're going to be speaking on the 7th chapter of Daniel. Again, 9 through 28 verses, but we're going to concentrate just on the Son of Man and what that meant in that portion of study. So we'll begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav la'asot b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in Torah. Okay, let's get started. The portion that we're going to be reading, actually most of everything I'm going to be talking about today is just in the 13th through the 15th verses, and it is Daniel 7, 13 through 15. I was watching in the night visions, behold, one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was brought into his presence. Dominion, glory, and sovereignty were given to him, that all peoples, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will never pass away, and his kingdom is one that will not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was disturbed within me, and the visions of my head alarmed me. Okay, so we can see through this passage there's several characteristics of this figure that we're going to call the Son of Man, and we see that that he appears to be divine. Now, we talked about that the last time we met, that he appeared to be divine because of the wording and the imagery of the wording that he came in the clouds. Now, there's I think about 70 different times in the Old Testament where a figure is spoken of as in the clouds, or coming in the clouds, or being in the clouds, or something like that. There's a reference to clouds and their appearance, and in each case they are a divine figure, like perhaps an angel, or perhaps some kind of an appearance of God, but each time it is divine. So that for that reason, I conclude that or we can conclude that this is a divine manifestation here, or the Son of Man is a divine being, a divine person. And this Son of Man also, he appears as a human being. Now, there's a picture of the clouds like that I had brought, I'd had in last week, or last time we met, just a representation, an artist's idea of what it might look like. So, and he's also, the Son of Man is in human form, because he is it's a form. The reason I say that is because look at what Daniel had been talking about previous to this. Had been talking about the four beasts, and he had described the four beasts as being the lion, the leopard, the bear, and then the other beast was something that he couldn't even describe because it was too beastly, and it didn't connect, or it didn't resemble any kind of earthly animal that he knew. He just said that it was just a terrible beast. So we see that this Son of Man did come in a human form. Now, it also looks like that perhaps he's a younger deity, or a younger person than the Ancient of Days that was portrayed earlier in Daniel. And then it says he would be enthroned on high. and then the last thing it said, he would be given power and dominion over all the earth. Now that is those are the things that we get out of these couple of verses, 13 and 14 that I read. Now we see that he was given power and dominion over all the earth. Now this power and authority of the beasts in Daniel's dreams had been stripped away from them, and it was given to the Son of Man. Now, the remnant of those first three beasts, you remember that the first three beasts, their power and dominion, their authority, their influence, everything was stripped away from them, and yet they were allowed to exist, and they were not destroyed. But again, they had no power, no influence or authority. And the fourth beast, the power of the fourth beast, it says, was totally destroyed, and and everything about it was totally destroyed, and no mention at all of any kind of a governmental residue that survived, or any kind of anything that survived after that. So this is one reason that I believe that the fourth beast might be what we call Islam today, because within Islam there is no central government or central caliphate or anything that can be identified. Islam is just too fragmented. You remember that, say back during the Soviet Union days, that there were many countries that were under the sphere of Russia, and they all took their orders from the Kremlin. The central power was concentrated in Moscow, in the Kremlin. So we don't have that kind of structure within Islam, and I brought that up last time we met, how that I think that perhaps Islam might be this fourth beast, and that it was more of a movement or a religion than it would be a world government. And some may agree with it, some may not. Now the above descriptions, all these descriptions that I got listed here on this screen, they compare just pretty much exactly with the New Testament portrayal of Yeshua, or Jesus. He's divine, yet he came in a human form. He was active on earth as a young man. We saw him in his ministry as a young man. He is now seated with the Father in heaven, the New Testament tells us, and that he will reign and rule over the earth during the 1,000-year millennium, and then after that he will reign forever in a new heaven and a new earth. So these things just match up exactly with what is listed in Daniel. So over the years, there's been a couple of ideas as to what the identity of the Son of Man may be. Now, some Jewish writers have interpreted the Son of Man kind of as a symbol of a collective, I guess, namely the faithful Israelites at the time of the Maccabean revolt. Now, this is one interpretation, and to go along with that interpretation, you have to presuppose that Daniel was written in the 2nd century BCE, somewhere around the time of the Maccabean revolt, rather than in the 6th century BCE, which was actually during the Babylonian Empire and during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, and then ending with Belshazzar. And then there are even other ones that I've read that they consider this Son of Man to be perhaps an appearance of the Archangel Michael, and that he was there representing or as a representative of the Jewish people. Now, other writers, of course, they reject these ideas and think that the Son of Man is a second divine figure who is, he goes along with, he's an accompaniment of the Ancient of Days and not an allegorical symbol for the people of Israel. Now, one of these writers that we have record of is he's an Iranian, 4th century. He was, of course, he was a church, as a Christian, he was a believer. His name was Aphrahat, Aphrahat, and or Aphrahat, whatever. And he argued against the collective idea. One of his writings, he says, "Have the children of Israel received the kingdom of the Most High? God forbid." He was very, pretty much anti-Jewish. Or has that people come on the clouds of heaven? Now, this was written in one of his writings called Demonstration, and it's Demonstration 5:21. Aphrahat's argument is actually right on. The reference to clouds was a common notion of divinity. We've talked about that already, where that anything that was written in the Old Testament talked about coming in the clouds was something of a divine nature. And certainly, the Jewish people as a whole, as in any people group, could not be considered as divine. Now, if the reference of coming in the clouds listed in Daniel 7:13 does not speak of a divine character, it's the only one of about 70 references in the Old Testament that does not show that person to be divine. So if all the other 70 or so, 69 or 70 references talk about coming in the clouds as being a divine symbol, and Daniel is the only one that does not, it kind of leads me to believe that, okay, we stick with Daniel here, and being divine. Now, the counter argument by the Jewish theologians is to ask then, would a divine being be subject to rule and subjugation by a Seleucid king who requires him to abandon his holy days and laws for 3.5 years? Absurd. The Son of Man must be a symbol for the children of Israel. Now, again, this argument does require us to assume that the book of Daniel was written by someone in the 2nd century BCE, somewhere around the time of the Maccabean revolt. Therefore, that's why they are making reference to the Seleucid king. So, anyway, who's right? Well, actually, both ideas are partially correct. And the divine being, we've talked about as him coming in the clouds. That's pretty straightforward, that just the imagery involved in this, to where he comes right into the presence of God and is immediately given the keys to the kingdom. It's would presuppose that he is a divine being. And but at the same time, if you look at the end of the chapter in Daniel 7:27, it says, "Then the kingdom, power, and greatness of the kingdoms under all heaven will be given to the people of the Kedushim," now of the Most High. Now that is the people of the holy ones of the Most High. So, another way of saying it's given to the people of the holy ones, or the chosen of God. Their kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dimensions will serve and obey him. So, and that's one of the things that we believe about the end times, is that the seat of government for the world will be in Jerusalem. And there are references in Revelation that speak of Israel being the seat of government, and that the people of God, the believers who are now spiritual Israel, also will be part of this this ruling group. And so it would be, my reference back to any empire, but back to the old Soviet Union, where all of their authority and everything was emanated from Moscow. Well, then in the millennium, and then in the new heaven and the new earth after the millennium, all of that will be from Jerusalem, from Israel. So I think what Daniel was trying to do here is to argue against this ancient idea of a more than singular God, and he was using an allegory to accomplish this purpose. So we can see that the theological argument between the Christians and the Jews regarding this verse was already an internal problem for the Jews of Jesus' day, or Yeshua's day. And according to Daniel Berean, now Daniel Berean wrote a book that I've read and reread and gone back over, called, and let's see if you can see that, the Jewish Gospels by Daniel Berean, the story of the Jewish Christ. And it's an excellent book. He's got a good summary of Daniel, the 7th chapter. Now, according to him, the idea of an older God with a younger associate, as it was not a new concept with the Jewish people. Now, that idea was present long before the angels disturbed the sleep of the shepherds around Bethlehem, on that night when Yeshua was born. When Israel first invaded Canaan, after the Exodus and after the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, and they started to take the Promised Land, there was already a tradition of two deities in Canaan. And you have to realize that the Jewish people became kind of residents of the Canaan, and so there was some bleeding over into their theology. The name of the deity back then was El. It was just, we would spell it E-L, and then the other one is Baal. Now, El being the older judge of the people, and Baal the younger, the warrior king who defended his people. This corresponded with El. It eventually just became, for the Israelites, or for Israel, it just came to symbolize God. And then the Baal for Canaanites related to the Yod He Vav He for Israel. Now, I personally have, this is coming from Daniel Berean. I have a little kind of a hard time getting my hands around that, and agreeing with that. But it's not the only place that I've read this idea that the El was, the creator God, and maybe a larger manifestation of God. And then the Baal in the Canaanite language actually just meant master. And so in that regard, maybe we could say that then that would sort of equate or relate to the Yod He Vav He for Israel. Now, right here, I'm going to stop and let people ask some questions, and open everything up to anybody that wanted to have a comment or question. Nobody did any writing in the chat, but what do you think of that kind of idea that there was perhaps the idea a dual Godhead, even back in the early ancient days of Israel after the Exodus. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Or had you ever even thought about that before?
The Spanish or El Señor could have come down from that. I don't know when the Spanish language was.
Yeah, I thought of that lots of times
instigated.
about the L, but the
El
Spanish,
Señor.
of course, in the Spanish, it's L is the. So Carlos said, well, this was all news to him. So, okay, Chuck, were you going to say something?
I don't know how good my bandwidth is right now with all the weather, but I kind of have to go back to Genesis where, and I'm sorry I don't have the verse in front of me, where it says there are three that bear record in heaven. And then when you deal with the dual Godhead from the, and I'm trying to speak from the outside in here,
Yeah.
but from a dual Godhead, I believe as they were learning, and as I would believe that the Spirit, if I may use that, was revealing to the prophets, and they were digging and they were reading the old scrolls, that they could possibly have discerned, oh, that's what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that opens up a lot of room for discussion at this point, especially when, you know, there's questions of the Trinity, especially in the New Testament. But from that point, again, not totally understanding some of the translations, but when you read in some of the, and I refer to the King James Bible, where there's a lot of let us make man in our own image, and different things. So going back into history, into Daniel's time, I could see, just as we do today, as we dig deeper, as we do research, as we find out in those things that we were raised up to believe, and there was no malice meant by it, but somebody just thought they had an understanding. But as you dig a little deeper and do a little research, and as knowledge increases in the last days, we find, oh, that's what that meant. And so I think maybe in this application, there was some digging around and saying, oh, is that what the prophet meant? Is that what that scroll meant? So just some food for thought.
Yeah. Well, you know, even in the Jewish tradition, you know, we have the Shema, and the word echad at the end of the Shema, you know, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. The word echad is a plural, or a plural word meaning one, sort of like you know, a couple. A married couple is one. You know, that is, they are one, and the word echad is a dual, or a, you know, it has room for more than just one. If it was just one, meaning one and only, you know, just a singular thing, it would be echid, and not echad. So yeah, there is room for that, and there is a you know, there's a good bit of writing on this subject where that, you know, even within ancient Israel, they had a concept of a duality of God. And if you were to ever pick up the book by Rabbi Yitzhak Shapira, a friend of mine that has written a book, and I've touted it before, recommended it before, The Return of the Kosher Pig. A very fascinating title, and the book is absolutely, it's not one that you can sit there. It is not light reading. Let's just say it that way. I've read it at least twice, and even after reading it twice, it's there's a whole lot of stuff in there that that I just don't get, because he goes a lot into some of the Hebrew and so forth that is very difficult for a non-native Hebrew speaker, which he is. He was raised and educated as a classic rabbi, and then he became a believer. But he brings out this idea that in the ancient writings they taught that there was a duality to God, that there was the Ancient of Days, and then there was also the other part of the Godhead. And so anyway, in the chat things here, that Michael said that he's read the same information about the El and Baal, and so it's kind of interesting. So in fact, the El, if you in some of the writings that I've read, some research that I've done, that was one of the things that they would always in their worship in Canaan and so forth. The El was basically a pillar. They would erect a straight up pillar, kind of like an obelisk, or say our Washington Monument kind of idea. That was when in these high places they would erect one of these high pillars, or a long stone pole or something like that. That was kind of the symbol for El. And there are those that make it out as some kind of a phallic symbol or something. I don't know, but that was one of the symbols for El. Was this was a kind of like the Washington Monument kind of a deal. Only obviously not that big, because they didn't have that technology. But okay, in the going on with what Daniel Berean was talking about, he said, in the biblical religion, in order to form a more perfect monotheism, these two divinities have been merged into one. We talk about the Jews say, no, there's only one God, but then they kind of forget about some of their history, because it's not quite seamless. The Israelites were a part of that ancient Canaanite community. And of course, they were differentiated to some extent by their different ideas about God that they developed through their historical existence. For instance, the Canaanites, they had this god Molech, where they sacrificed their firstborn child to Molech in the fire. And so he was, actually he was the equivalent to the Baal. And so they had that, and there were differences in the God of Israel and the laws of Israel as opposed to the laws of the Canaanites. Another instance is the temples that the Canaanites and the other people of that region had. Their temple prostitution was a major part of their worship, and that type of practice was something that was absent. In fact, it was strictly prohibited and forbidden in the Israelite version of what God would have them do. But in the Canaanites, that was a big part of and of course that's part of the draw of it, I suppose. But in Israel, no, God demanded a moral standing that would not permit all of that. But the idea of a duality within God, they couldn't really escape that too much. There are.
But you have to remember, I mean, if you ever try to witness to a Jew and you mention the Trinity, oh boy, that just blows them out of the water, because no, it's one God, it's one God, it's one God. And they forget, you know, God manifested himself in the burning bush.
Okay,
the pillar of fire, did anyone else lose audio besides Carlos? Okay. God manifests himself in the burning bush, the pillar of fire, and the cloud by day, and the wind. He has manifested himself in so many things, but there's still that closed mind there. And even like Chuck had mentioned, when in Genesis, when they were talking about creation, the Hebrew words used were plural, and the Shema, the Hebrew words used were plural. But there's that.
The idea of the Trinity is just not something that you'll never get too far with speaking to a Jewish person and using the Trinity. Now, the idea that a God that was very far away, the El, that it generates almost inevitably a need for a God who is closer. A God who judges us requires almost inevitably a God who will fight for us and defend us, as long as this second God is completely subordinate to the first. Then the principle of monotheism is not violated. So that's some of the pretzels that we have to twist ourselves in, to have this idea that, okay, there's only one God, but then not. So
not just the Trinity.
The unreconstructed relic of Israel's religious past, or possibly even today, that we find in this two thrones idea, or the two thrones theophany, actually, the manifestation of God in Daniel 7. It was no doubt disturbing to at least some of the Jews in the old days, in the antiquity, even to Daniel himself, because he says in there that he was greatly troubled by this vision, and he could have been troubled by the beast. I mean, that would have been pretty troubling. But he could also, when I read through that, my own thought on that was when he saw the part about the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man coming together as somehow working in concert, that was kind of hard for him to dissemble and to figure out, okay, how's this now with the one God concept? So, and we do know that other Jews adopted, wholeheartedly, or maybe they just simply inherited it, like some people, they're born to parents who are active in their church and their religious tradition, and so therefore that's who they are. But they've either adopted this or totally inherited the doubleness or the duality of Israel's God, the old Ancient of Days and the young human appearing rider in the clouds. These became then the progenitors of Judaism, of Yeshua, Jesus, and his followers. So this concept of a God head, or God the Father, and then God the Son was there in Judaism. It was not a new concept. So therefore, the people could accept that. It wasn't something totally outside their frame of reference, as it were. So even Yeshua talked about that he and the Father are one, and that he was going to go back and he would be sitting on the right hand of the Father, and that he prayed to the Father. So that wasn't new, for these guys, and they could accept that. That was something that now they're seeing Yeshua just kind of manifesting that self. So this two throne apocalypse in Daniel, it calls up a very, very ancient strand in Israel's religion, one in which it would seem like this L-like sky god of justice, and the younger rider on the clouds, the storm god of war, may not really have been merged as far as for most of the Bible. Now, Berean said that he finds it plausible that this highly significant passage is a sign of religious traditions that gave rise to the notion of the Father divinity and of a Son divinity that then we find in the Gospels. And of course, then with the advent of the Holy Spirit coming in, then that completes this notion of the triune Godhead. So that's some of the things that we find coming out of this Daniel 7. That it is a prophecy to me. It looks more like a pointing to the end times, where we see that Yeshua, Jesus, is going to be the ruler, and it does give us a good picture of the relationship between God the Father and God the Son.